we're going to work now with, oh, you might guess, graphics. Graphics are additional shapes not associated with any data set. This is just like you would see in ArcMap, where you could add points, lines, and polygons to a map and so on. The graphics can be created by the end user or by the application using code. We'll do that tonight. It'll be displayed on top of the map canvas. One thing though, and I think I have this on, there's 4 main components to making a graphic in the JavaScript API, which is a little bit more involved than in ArcObjects. Geometry, obviously what type of geometry? Is it a square, is it a circle, and where is it? The symbol, the look of the graphic. If it's a triangle, is it green? Does it have a width of 2? Is it what color, what's the opacity, and so on. But unlike, this goes beyond what ArcMap graphics are. Unlike ArcMap, you can attach attributes to a graphic. You could grab attributes from a real feature layer from a GIS dataset and attach it to a graphic. That's not something you would do necessarily in ArcMap. And we can also define something called the info template. The info template defines the format of the identify window. Remember, if you do Lab 3 and back to what we discussed on Monday in ArcGIS Online, where we defined the box showing the state flag and all of that, that was defining an info template in ArcGIS Online, and you can do the same here with the info template property on your graphic. So graphics do go a step beyond. They go a step beyond what they would be in ArcMap. And I showed, as one example, I showed an example of this is a crime tracker application for managing current locations with active crime. I think that's low enough resolution no one can read that. This is a graphics layer. This is a Silverlight, not JavaScript, but it's the same concept. So our programmer has base maps. They have the SRI imagery base map. So now you can understand a little bit more of what goes into a map like this. It has a dynamic map service layer, which in this case shows the Niagara County municipalities, and it shows dots showing crime locations. The programmer reads those crime locations from a dispatcher's program and places them on the map as a graphics layer. So there's a real world use of a graphics layer. And the graphics do have attributes, and when the user clicks on it, and luckily the reminder might not be sensitive information there, so luckily it's not readable. Those are attributes that he's attached to the graphic, even though it's just a graphic. It was created from a feature layer underneath it, and because of that, the programmer can develop these attributes regarding the attribute. And again, that was Silverlight, but Silverlight has a lot of the same properties and methods that you would see in JavaScript. So the core concept still applies. Geometry types are similar to what's available in ArcObjects, but with many fewer options. And here is the geometry library in the JavaScript reference. There's not that many. There are 19 different geometry types, I think, in ArcObjects, and here we basically have 5. There's a few more than that I didn't list. You have the 3 basic ones: point, line, polygon, circle, extent is a rectangle, and there's a 6th one I left out called multi-point. A multi-point is like a region of multi-point is the ability to have multiple points, but it's represented as one record. And you can do, that's not unique to this, you can do that in ArcMap also. And there used to be a model, I'm really dating myself now that I started to say it, called region, where you could have multiple polygons is one record that used to be called a region. I don't think that that exists anymore, but you can merge polygons now if you've ever done that. So those are types of geometry in the in the JavaScript API. We also have, and this is very similar. In fact, it's got the same names as some of the classes in ArcObjects. If you took ArcObjects, you'll remember some of these, where you have marker symbols for points, line symbols for lines, and fill symbols for polygons. So of those three, the most common implementation and what we'll focus on will be simple. So simple marker symbol, simple line symbol, and simple fill symbol. There are a couple others, as you see here in the screenshot from the API. Cartographic line symbol, picture marker symbol, etc. But text symbol, of course. But we don't have as many options as we had in ArcObjects. For brevity's sake, I think we'll stick to the simple marker, simple line, and simple fill for this course. So let's add a new point to the map. The constructor reference for this is found in the API reference for esri.geometry.point. So if I go to esri, click, geometry, we see the different classes within geometry, and that sure enough there's a point. So if I click on that, we see all the different constructors. So to create a new point, we can say new esri.geometry.point and then give an XY and then a spatial reference, which is optional. It is required. It's not optional. You can also construct in a variety of ways. You can use this format for constructing a point, x, comma, y, comma, spatial reference. You can use an array of chords as one array with the two numbers in it representing x and y. That's really not that different. Or you can pass in a JSON formatted string to define the point with name and value pairs, like we've seen in other JSON examples, with x value, y value, and then the spatial reference. Using a spatial reference as WKID. I don't know if we've touched on that. I think we'll have a slide on that very shortly. Or if you don't, I believe this to be the case, if you don't assign a spatial reference, it'll assume that it's latitude, longitude, geographic projection. So, excuse me. So to add a point, let's add a point. Excuse me. So first, I'm going to, slide 12 doesn't show this, but I'm going to require the Esri geometry library. Thusly. So now I've loaded Esri geometry into the page. And there's another nuance to this. You should not, the graphics go on what's called a graphics layer. So on a map, just like an ArcMap is a good analogy, you have feature layers, parcels, streets, roads, and so on. And then you have graphics on top of it. That's called a graphics layer in the JavaScript map. The graphics layer is not available until the map is loaded. So you would put the addition of graphics at startup into an onload event to make sure that they don't get added until the map is finished. If you don't do that, you just put it on the page load up, it'll try and add the graphic before the graphics layer is available, and you'll get an error. So I'm going to say Dojo connect map, the onload event of the map, and write an anonymous function here. So again, that means when the Dojo connect means that when we have the map loading, whatever I write in here will run. And to do that, I can create a new point with the constructor. And I had to do this for some reason. So the X and Y, and because it's that long, I don't really need to include this, but I want to show it. There's a class esri.spatialReference. And I'm adding WKID of 4326. That gets confusing. So we created a new point at that latitude, longitude, and with that spatial reference. I think we did talk about that already. That one gets Googled a lot. Spatial WKID 4326 is the WGS84 geographic projection. And I think I did mention, about the website spatialreference.org, where you can search for the WKID for your projection of choice. So I've created my... It doesn't seem right, but it's happy. No, that's right. So I've created a point at that particular latitude, longitude location. So now I'm going to create a marker symbol for it. I'm going to have to add some more requireds, I think. So I'm going to create a new SimUB, stands for, or will be a new simple marker symbol. Remember, marker symbols are for points. And there's a couple of enumerations that we can assign. I'm saying square. If I go to ESR, if the API for this, simple marker symbol, they're the constants. So those are the possible choices for that, for the simple marker symbol. We have a circle, cross, diamond, path. What is a path? Oh, you can define it using Adobe SVG. I've never done that. Square and X. You can also set other things, and we'll do a couple of these in a second, such as the marker's color, size, and so on. Angle, rotate it. And I will add a require statement. I think that's what I have to do. Let's see. Just Israel symbol. So now I have the symbol is square, we know that. We can set its marker size to the point size, type size, and I can use Dojo to set a color. So set color, and I can say a new Dojo.color, and then one way to assign that is an array with 4 numbers in it. The first 3 numbers is the RGB value. Red, green, blue. So there's no green in this, it's red and blue. And the 4th value is the opacity. I think this is opposite from the JSON for the map. I believe 1 is solid and 0 is empty. So now we have a symbol that's, I think that's purplish. We'll see. That's a square and size 18. Well, we can now finally make our graphic. So I can add the graphic, and the two options that are most important for the constructor for the graphic is the geometry, which was a variable point UB, and the symbology, sim UB. And once we have the graphics, this is how we access the default graphics layer. Map.graphics.add allows us to add that graphic. I don't think we covered this, but you can create multiple graphics layers in the JavaScript API. You can't really do that. Well, that's not true. You could do it in ArcMap using different annotation groups if you've ever done that. You can go to map, and one of the methods is, excuse me, somewhere there you can add a graphics layer. So you can add a new graphics layer as a layer and then add that layer to the map. We don't have an example of that, but I just wanted to show you that constructor. So here this user in the help is creating a new graphics layer with the name county layer, and then you could just add that right to your map. And it's another layer based on graphics, not based on any underlying GIS data set. So let's see if that works. I think I have an error. I'll click F12. When you, this is good. I did the require wrong. when you get an error that says failed to load a JavaScript file in the JS API, and it has a name here, like that, that usually means that there's a typo in the require statement. And I think it's supposed to be esri.symbol, not symbols, now that I see that. So let me make that esri.symbol and see if it builds. There we go. Well, we may have another problem. We got further. Undefined is not a function. This is good. It helps us go through some of the problems that can happen. So it gives us our file name, and that means in our HTML file, row 47, column 89, there's an error. So I can actually go back to Visual Studio, find row 47, in column 89. I mean, it's character 89. Oh, I see. Esri spatial reference. What did I say about typos before? Reference. And I'll see if I have. We'll see if I have to. Still. 12 graphics UB is not defined. So see, this is all an iterative process. And now I see it's line 55, column character 30 is where the error now is. And gosh, I'm not good with the typos tonight. We should end early. The variable is graphic UB, but I tried to add graphics UB. It gives us the chance to look at debugging, and sure enough, there's a purple square. So I've added that point, and you might recognize the location. I've added that point to the map as a graphic. Any questions? So now we have experience with adding, we've worked just a little bit with tile map surface layers. We've had an introduction to dynamic map surface layers and an introduction to graphics layers, 3 of the most used. And I also have a couple slides that show, we looked at this live, but here's the constructor for point and the constructor reference for simple marker symbol. And this is actually what we just did. So just to recap that, we used dojo.connect to attach our function to the onload event. And then we create the point with an XY location, and as I mentioned, 4326 is the WGS84 spatial reference. And we assign a symbol. I just use a different color in the example than we just used. You create the graphic and add it with just the first 2 options. We looked at 4 options a couple slides ago. We're now only looking at the 2 most critical options, the geometry and the symbol. We'll shortly look at the other 2 options that we talked about, the attributes and info window. And there's our point on the map. Any questions? Well, we'll move on and add a line to the map. And you'll see that it's a very similar process. So just to show a couple other different ways of doing things, I'm going to create the spatial reference as a variable. I called it MSR. I don't know why. And again, the 4326 WKID represents WGS84 geographic. I'm going to create a variable called myLine, and instead of point, the class is polyline. And I'm going to do this. Let's look at the line spatial reference. Polyline, I should really say. There's a couple ways in which you can construct a polyline. I'm doing the first one where we just give it the spatial reference. You can also give it a JSON stringed object format string with something called a path. We'll set the path secondarily in the example in just a second. But all a path is a collection of points. So it's like connect the dots. So all the dots in a path connect to make a line. You can also add an array of points right into the constructor. So as I said, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a path. And what the path is, and this is maybe not the best way to do it, it's going to take a lot of typing. The path is an array of points. Connect the dots, as I said. With 3 arguments. The longitude, latitude, and the spatial reference. So now there's just 2 points in my path. And if I had a rhyme or reason for those numbers or not. So there's the third line in my path, third point in my path. Again, now for my path, I've created an array. The array has 4 things in it, and each thing is a ESRI geometry point defined by its longitude, latitude, and spatial reference, WGS84. I'm thinking I would not have had to include the spatial reference because it's geographic, but I did to demonstrate. I'm gonna